The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chambers sparkled under three artificial suns. Inside, thousands of alien representatives sat in rising circles, their attention fixed on the single human standing at the central podium. James Walker, Earth's chief representative, stood straight and tall in his plain black uniform, a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by other species. For 300 years, he said, his voice carrying through the chamber, humanity has contributed to this council. We've solved your computational problems. We've fixed your transport networks. We've even saved 16 of your worlds from natural disasters. He paused, looking around at the gathered aliens. And yet, you still treat us like children. The council leader, a tall being with silver skin, waved a dismissive hand. You are young, barely spaceworthy. The council's restrictions on human expansion are for your own good. Walker smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That's exactly the problem. While you forced us to limit our colony numbers, you expanded freely into the spaces we had mapped. While you restricted our ship sizes, you built ever larger vessels using our designs. While you demanded we share our AI technology, you kept your own advances secret. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others puffed up with obvious anger. Therefore, Walker continued, pulling a small data crystal from his pocket, I am here to inform you that as of this moment, Earth and all human colonies are formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council. The chamber erupted in chaos. Dozens of representatives jumped to their feet, shouting in various languages. The council leader's silver skin turned a dark gray in shock. You cannot do this, the leader thundered. No species has ever withdrawn from the council. The penalties. The penalties only apply to member species. Walker cut in. We are no longer members. Our decision is final. A large reptilian representative leaned forward. Without the council's protection, you will be defenseless. There are many who would take advantage of isolated worlds. Walker's laugh echoed through the chamber, silencing the chaos. Protection. Let's be honest. You need us far more than we need you. Even now, human technicians are disconnecting our systems from council networks. Our trade ships are returning home. Our military vessels are pulling back to human space. This is merely a tantrum, the council leader said, but uncertainty had crept into their voice. You will return when you realize the dangers of independence. No, Walker said simply. We won't. As he turned to leave, a small bird-like alien called out, Your species will regret this arrogance. Walker stopped at the chamber doors. Actually, we regret not doing this sooner. Good day. In orbit above the council world, 50 human ships simultaneously activated their jump drives. In ports across council space, human merchants paid their final docking fees and departed. In countless computer systems, human-made programs went dark. The council representatives watched in growing alarm as reports flooded in. 20% of their computational capacity gone. 30% of their logistics networks offline. 15% of their defense systems deactivated. The council leader rushed to their private chamber and ordered an emergency connection to Earth. The screen remained dark. All standard communication channels with human space had been cut. In his ship heading back to Earth, Walker looked at the final reports coming in from across human space. The withdrawal was proceeding exactly as planned. Decades of preparation were paying off. Humanity had extracted itself from council space like a surgeon removing a tumor. Clean, precise, final. He thought back to the council chamber and almost felt pity. They still didn't understand. They had never understood. Humanity hadn't joined the council looking for protection or guidance. They had joined looking for equals, for partners in exploring the galaxy. Instead, they found arrogant masters who saw them as clever pets at best. Well, they would understand soon enough. As his ship entered jump space, Walker smiled. The council thought humanity needed them to survive in this dangerous galaxy. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. 6 months after humanity's departure, the first major cracks began to show in the Galactic Council's facade of control. The grand halls of the Council's trade center, once bustling with activity, now stood eerily quiet. Screens that had once displayed real-time shipping data now flickered with error messages and outdated information. Trade Master Robert, a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, stared at the latest reports with growing horror. 3 major trading hubs had completely shut down in the past week alone. The automated systems that had guided ships through dangerous space lanes were failing one by one. Without human technicians to maintain them, the complex networks were falling apart. "How bad is it?" asked his assistant, looking over his shoulder. "Worse than anyone predicted," Robert replied, rubbing his temples. The humans didn't just build these systems, they designed them to need human oversight. All our attempts to replicate their code have failed. In another part of Council space, a massive cargo ship drifted helplessly in space. Its captain, an experienced trader named Mills, had relied on human-made navigation systems for 20 years. Now, forced to use the Council's outdated methods, he had taken a wrong turn in a twisted part of space and lost his bearings. "Send another distress signal," he ordered his crew. 2 days later, when help finally arrived, they found out they weren't alone. Dozens of ships had made similar mistakes in the past month. The brilliant AI systems that had prevented such errors were gone, taken back to human space. The council chambers, once a place of order and ceremony, had devolved into a theater of chaos. Representatives argued daily, each blaming others for their current predicament. "We must send another delegation to Earth," shouted one member. "They won't even answer our calls," replied another. "And can you blame them? We treated them like children while depending on their technology." The council leader, their silver skin now permanently tinted gray with stress, watched the arguments with growing despair. Reports from across council space told the same story. Their civilization was slowly grinding to a halt. In a secret meeting room far below the council chambers, representatives from 12 different species gathered quietly. They weren't supposed to meet like this. All diplomatic contact was meant to go through official council channels. But desperate times called for desperate measures. "My world has already made contact with Earth," admitted one representative, their voice barely above a whisper. "They're willing to trade with individual species as long as we agree to their terms." "What terms?" asked another. "Equal treatment, no restrictions, and absolutely no council involvement." The news spread through the room like wildfire. More representatives admitted to secret negotiations with Earth. The humans, it seemed, had planned for this. They had prepared for individual worlds to come crawling back, one by one. In orbit around a distant mining world, a council patrol fleet discovered something disturbing. Pirates, once kept in check by human military patrols, were growing bold. The patrol's commander watched helplessly as 3 pirate ships jumped away with stolen cargo. Their faster ships, based on stolen human designs, easily outpaced the council vessels. Back on the council's capital world, the trade master made a chilling discovery. The humans hadn't just taken their technology. They had taken their best and brightest with them. Thousands of alien scientists, engineers, and traders who had worked closely with humans had quietly disappeared, emigrating to human space in the weeks before the withdrawal. The Council's arrogance had cost them dearly. They had assumed humanity needed the Council to survive in the galaxy. Instead, humanity had spent centuries building connections, making allies, and preparing for independence. As the Council scrambled to maintain control, a simple message arrived from Earth. It was sent to every world in Council space, bypassing official channels. To all independent worlds, Earth welcomes trade negotiations with free and sovereign planets. The future belongs to those who choose cooperation over control. The power vacuum left by humanity's departure was quickly becoming a black hole, threatening to swallow the Council whole. The Meridian Empire had waited centuries for this moment. Their warships, sleek and dark against the stars, gathered at the edges of Council space. Admiral White stood on his flagship's bridge, watching tactical displays show the Council's weakened defense grid. "All ships report ready, Admiral," his second-in-command reported. White nodded slowly. The humans knew this would happen. That's why they left observation posts behind. He gestured to the small, unmarked satellites that floated silently in neutral space. "They're watching us tear the Council apart." The attack began at dawn, measured by the capital world's time. 300 Meridian ships jumped into Council space simultaneously. The automated defense systems, designed and maintained by human engineers for generations, failed spectacularly. Instead of an organized response, the Council's weapons fired randomly, hitting their own ships as often as the invaders. On the Council capital world, alarms blared through the grand chambers. The Council leader stumbled from his bed, rushing to the war room. The tactical display showed 3 major Council worlds under attack. "Where are our defense fleets?" he demanded. "Scattered," a general replied, his scaled face pale with fear. "Without the human eye coordination systems, we can't organize a proper response. Half our ships can't even find the battle." The first Council world fell within 6 hours. Port Wilson, a major trading hub, surrendered after its orbital defenses shut down completely. The Meridian Empire's troops marched through streets they had coveted for generations. In orbit around a neutral world, a human observation team watched the invasion through powerful sensors. Captain Reed made careful notes but took no action. Earth's policy was clear. Let the Council face the consequences of their actions. "Second world has fallen," his sensor operator reported. "New Paradise Colony. Their ground defenses never activated." Reed nodded grimly. The Council forgot that humans designed their military networks to need human oversight. They thought they could just take over the systems. The third Council world, Iron Gate, lasted 3 days. Its defenders fought bravely, but without the advanced targeting systems they had relied on for so long, their weapons were barely effective. The Meridian Empire's ships, using their own tech rather than copied human designs, cut through their defenses like paper. In the Council chambers, panic had replaced arrogance. Representatives who had once looked down on humanity now fought to access any human technology left behind. But the humans had been thorough. Everything they had built, they had either taken or disabled. "We must contact Earth," a representative shouted during an emergency session. "Surely they won't let the Meridians conquer us." Earth's response was clear. Another shot back. They said, and I quote, "The Council's military situation is no longer our concern." On his flagship, Admiral White received reports of more Council worlds begging for Meridian protection. The mighty Council was falling apart faster than anyone had expected. Without human technology connecting their worlds, coordinating their ships, and running their defense systems, they were discovering just how dependent they had become. The human observation posts continued their silent watch. Captain Reed's reports back to Earth were detailed and dispassionate. 3 major worlds fallen. Council defense forces in disarray. Meridian Empire advancing on 6 more systems. "It's almost sad," his communications officer said, watching another Council fleet scatter in confusion. They really didn't understand what they were losing. Reed shook his head. They understood. They just thought they were too powerful to fall. That's why they kept treating humanity like children while relying on human innovation to maintain their power. The Meridian Empire's advance continued, unstoppable. The Council's arrogance had finally caught up with them. They had spent centuries looking down on humanity while building their entire civilization on human technology and expertise. Now, as their worlds fell one by one, they finally understood the true cost of their mistake. But it was too late. The first dominoes had fallen, and the collapse was just beginning. In the darkness of space, the human observation posts kept watching, recording the end of an era and the chaos that would follow. The emergency storage facility on Council World Beta Prime had once held enough food to feed billions. Now, Guard Captain Stone watched as the last shipment was loaded onto a heavily armed transport. His orders were clear: protect his world's resources at all costs. Another riot in the capital city, his lieutenant reported. They're demanding we share supplies with neighboring systems. Stone shook his head. There's barely enough for our own people. The Council's food distribution network is dead without human logistics systems. Every world for itself now. Across Council space, the same scene played out on countless worlds. Ancient alliances crumbled as species fought over dwindling resources. The complex trade networks that had kept civilization running smoothly have depended on human expertise. Without it, everything was falling apart. In what remained of the council chambers, the leader received yet another resignation. 3 more species had officially withdrawn, following humanity's example. But unlike the humans' organized departure, this was pure panic. The pirates have taken another transport fleet, and 8 reported. They're getting bolder. Without human patrol ships, they're attacking everything that moves. The leader stared at the latest reports. Pirate attacks had increased by 800% in the past month alone. The raiders seemed to appear from nowhere, strike hard, and vanish before council ships could respond. Many suspected they were using abandoned human patrol routes, paths through space that only human navigators had known. On the edges of former council space, independent trader Jack Brown guided his ship through the chaos. As one of the few remaining non-council captains still willing to make deliveries, he charged premium rates. His ship's holds were filled with basic supplies that had once been abundant throughout council space. Another distress call, his pilot reported. Council world asking for emergency medical supplies. Ignore it, Brown replied. We don't deal with council worlds anymore. Earth's orders. Let them solve their own problems. The Council's unified currency, once the standard for galactic trade, had collapsed entirely. Worlds were reverting to precious metals and barter systems. Some had started printing their own money, but nobody trusted it. Only Earth's credits still held value, and they were refusing to prop up the Council's economy. In a secure bunker on a former Council world, planetary leaders watched their society crumble. Their people were hungry, their ships couldn't safely navigate between systems, and their advanced technology was failing without human maintenance. We should have listened, one leader said quietly. The humans tried to warn us. They said our system was unsustainable without equal partnership. Meanwhile, Earth continued to thrive. Reports reached Council space of human worlds prospering, their ships safely traveling trade routes that Council vessels could no longer navigate. They had built their own networks, their own economy, their own alliances with non-Council worlds. The pirates grew more organized, establishing bases in abandoned Council outposts. Some said they were led by former Council military officers who had lost faith in the old system. Their ships preyed on the weakened Council worlds, knowing there would be no human patrol fleets to stop them. In orbit around a dying Council world, an automated distress beacon repeated its message endlessly. Need food. Need medicine. We'll trade technology for basic supplies. Nobody answered. The technology they offered was useless. Designed by humans, it needed human expertise to function. The Council leader received the final blow during the emergency session. Their top scientists admitted they couldn't replicate human technological innovations. They had grown so dependent on human designs that they had forgotten how to innovate on their own. Perhaps, suggested one brave representative, we should have spent less time restricting humans and more time learning from them. But it was too late for such wisdom. The great unraveling had begun, and nothing could stop it. The Council's power was built on human innovation, human efficiency, and human reliability. Without these foundations, it was collapsing like a house of cards. Earth watched from afar as their predictions came true. The Council hadn't just needed humanity's technology. They had needed humanity's spirit of cooperation, innovation, and adaptability. Now they were learning that lesson the hard way. The first shots of the new war were fired over a water-rich moon that 2 Council species had shared peacefully for centuries. Now, with the Council's authority in shambles, ancient grudges resurfaced. Battle cruisers from both sides exchanged fire in orbit, while ground forces clashed on the surface. Commander Hall watched from his human observation post as the battle unfolded. "This is just the beginning," he told his crew. 500 years of forced peace under the Council's rule. All those old hatreds were just sleeping. He was right. Within weeks, more conflicts erupted across former Council space. Species that had once sat together in the Council chambers now turned their weapons on each other. Old territorial disputes, religious differences, and historical vendettas exploded into open warfare. The insectoid collective attacked their ancient rivals, the crystal beings, claiming territories that had been disputed since before humans reached the stars. Their war machines, hastily rebuilt without human technology, were crude but deadly. "We always knew this would happen," General Green of the Crystal Beings declared as he ordered his forces to retaliate. "The Council forced us to play nice while humans held the power. Now we can settle things the old way." The refugee crisis hit next. Civilian populations fled the fighting in whatever ships they could find. Space stations designed to hold thousands were now packed with millions. Disease spread through the crowded facilities, made worse by the failure of medical systems that had once been maintained by human technicians. On a border station near human space, Dr. Ward looked at the latest batch of refugees. They came from dozens of species, many of whom had once looked down on humanity. Now they begged for sanctuary in human territory. Another transport requesting permission to dock, his assistant reported. "They have wounded aboard." Ward nodded. "Let them in. Earth's orders are clear. We accept all civilian refugees, regardless of species." The station's medical bay, built with human technology that still worked perfectly, soon filled with aliens seeking treatment. Many were seeing human medical technology in action for the first time, finally understanding why their own systems had been so dependent on human expertise. The war spread like a virus through former Council space. Species that had been peaceful for centuries discovered they hadn't forgotten how to fight. But they had forgotten how to fight effectively. Their military forces, built around human-designed systems, performed poorly without human support. In the remnants of the Council chambers, the last few representatives watched helplessly as reports of new conflicts arrived hourly. Their peacekeeping forces, once the pride of the galaxy, were useless without human coordination systems. "Another colony world has gone dark," an aide reported. "No response to communications. Population unknown." The Council leader, now leading only in name, slumped in his chair. The great civilization they had built was tearing itself apart. And somewhere out there, human observation posts recorded everything, documenting the collapse they had predicted. On Earth, the refugee reports were analyzed carefully. Temporary housing was being constructed on multiple worlds to accommodate those fleeing the fighting. It was a massive undertaking, but humanity had prepared for this. "Every refugee we help is a potential ally in the future," President Wilson told his advisors. "When the fighting ends, they'll remember who helped them." Back in Council space, the wars escalated. Weapons that had been banned for centuries reappeared on battlefields. Species that had once prided themselves on their civilization now fought with primitive fury. Commander Hall continued his observations, noting how quickly the Council's forced peace had crumbled. Without human technology to maintain their systems, without human diplomacy to smooth their relations, without human innovation to solve their problems, the Council species had reverted to their old ways. "The Council kept the peace through force and dependence," he wrote in his report to Earth. "They never taught their members how to cooperate, how to solve problems together. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy, and they rejected it. Now they're paying the price." The wars showed no sign of ending. The refugee ships kept coming, and humanity watched, waiting for the moment when the fighting species would finally understand what they had lost. The once grand Council chambers, now scarred by warfare and neglect, hosted a very different kind of meeting. Representatives from former Council species stood in line, waiting for their turn to approach the single human diplomat who had agreed to hear their pleas. Ambassador Thomas sat calmly at a simple desk, reviewing each desperate request for help. The mighty species that had once looked down on humanity now competed for his attention. "Our world offers complete access to our crystal mines," one representative said, mandibles clicking nervously. "In exchange for human technical support." Thomas shook his head. "Earth isn't interested in one-sided deals anymore. You're the fourth species today offering resources for help. What we want is genuine cooperation." Outside the chambers, a line of diplomatic ships stretched into orbit. Each carried leaders who had once supported the Council's restrictions on humanity. Now they came bearing gifts, promises, and apologies. In Earth's orbital command center, President Wilson reviewed the latest requests for alliance. "They still don't understand," he told his advisors. "They think they can buy their way back to power." A holographic display showed the current state of former Council space. Nearly 30% of their worlds were engaged in active warfare. Another 40% faced economic collapse. The remaining worlds survived only through secret deals with human traders. Back in the Council chambers, Thomas listened to another plea. "Surely you must see that the galaxy needs order," a former Council leader argued. "Help us rebuild the Council. We'll give humans equal status this time." "Equal status?" Thomas smiled. "You still think in terms of status and hierarchy. That's why we left. That's why we're refusing your offers. The old Council system is dead." On a dozen former Council worlds, human observation posts continued their work. They recorded the growing chaos, the failed attempts at rebuilding without human help, and most importantly, the slow realization spreading through the galaxy. Captain Reed, commanding an observation station, watched a Council battle fleet drift powerless in space. Their advanced weapons, copied from human designs, had finally failed completely. Now they floated helplessly, broadcasting distress signals. Another fleet requesting emergency assistance, his communications officer reported. "Should we respond?" "Same answer as always," Reed replied. "Direct them to submit a formal aid request through Earth's diplomatic channels." The Council species were learning hard lessons. Their civilization had been built on human innovation, maintained by human efficiency, and protected by human military design. Without these foundations, they were discovering how weak they truly were. In Earth's diplomatic corps, a new message was being prepared. It would be sent to every world in former Council space, offering a different kind of relationship. Not the old hierarchy of the Council, but something new. "The Terran Cooperative," President Wilson announced to his staff. "Open to all species willing to work as true equals. No restrictions based on age or origin. No forced sharing of technology. No artificial limitations on growth." The message spread quickly through the galaxy. Some former Council species rejected it immediately, too proud to accept the new reality. Others, seeing the success of human worlds and their allies, began serious discussions about joining. Ambassador Thomas received the news in his temporary office in the old Council chambers. The line of supplicants outside his door would soon learn that the rules had changed. Earth wasn't interested in their bribes or their desperate offers of submission. "Humanity doesn't want to rule," he practiced saying, preparing for another day of meetings. "We want partners. We want innovation. We want genuine cooperation. Those who understand this are welcome to join us. Those who don't can find their own way forward." The galaxy was changing. The species that had once dominated through control and restriction were learning that true power came from cooperation and mutual respect. It was a difficult lesson, taught by the very humans they had tried to keep down. As another day of diplomatic meetings began, Thomas looked at the long line of representatives waiting to speak with him. They had finally been humbled, but had they been humbled enough to change? The answer would determine the future of the galaxy. 5 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy looked very different. The shining towers of New Earth, humanity's diplomatic capital, hosted representatives from 30 different species. None were former Council members. These were the independent worlds that had chosen to join the Terran Cooperative from the start. President Wilson stood at the grand window of his office, watching ships from across the galaxy dock at the orbital stations. Each vessel represented a society that had chosen cooperation over dominance, innovation over restriction. Another application for membership, his aide reported, placing a datapad on his desk. This one's interesting. It's from the crystal beings. Wilson nodded. The crystal beings had once been among the proudest council species. Now, after years of war and hardship, they had finally understood what humanity had been trying to teach all along. In the cooperative's main hall, Ambassador Thomas led a delegation of new members through their orientation. These were species that had never been part of the council, worlds that had developed on their own. The cooperative has 3 basic rules, he explained. First, all members are equal, regardless of their age or technology level. Second, sharing of technology and knowledge is encouraged but never forced. Third, any attempt to restrict another member's growth will result in immediate expulsion. The new members nodded approvingly. They had watched the council collapse under its own arrogance. They had seen how humanity's approach, based on mutual respect and genuine cooperation, had created prosperity and peace. On the borders of cooperative space, human patrol ships maintained order alongside vessels from member species. Unlike the Council's forced peacekeeping, these joint patrols were voluntary, with each species contributing what they could. Captain Reed, now commanding one of these mixed fleets, watched his alien crew work seamlessly with human officers. "This is what we wanted all along," he told his first officer. "Not to rule, but to work together. To learn from each other." The former council species were learning this lesson the hard way. Those that survived the wars and collapse were slowly rebuilding, but differently this time. They had seen their mighty civilization fall apart without human support. Now they knew that true strength came from cooperation, not control. In the Application Processing Center of New Earth, clerks reviewed submissions from former council worlds. The requirements were strict. Each applicant had to prove they had abandoned their old ways of thinking. Another rejection, one clerk announced. "This species still wants special status based on their age. They haven't learned yet." But some had learned. The more adaptable former council species were already making changes. They dismantled their hierarchical systems, encouraged innovation among their people, and built genuine relationships with their neighbors. President Wilson reviewed the latest reports from across the galaxy. The cooperative now controlled more territory than the council ever had, but it was different. Each member world maintained its independence while contributing to the greater whole. The council tried to force unity, he told his advisors. "We created it naturally, by treating each species with respect and allowing them to develop in their own way." In orbit around Earth, a monument had been built. A massive holographic display showing the growth of the cooperative. Former council worlds appeared as dark spots on the map, slowly brightening as they reformed and applied for membership. Ambassador Thomas, speaking to a group of new applicants, summarized humanity's vision. "We don't want your submission. We don't want your resources. We want your ideas, your unique perspectives, your contributions to our shared future." The galaxy was entering a new age. The Council's fall had taught every spacefaring species a valuable lesson. True civilization couldn't be built on restriction and control. It had to grow from mutual respect, shared innovation, and genuine cooperation. As another day ended on New Earth, President Wilson looked at the latest membership applications. More former Council species were finally ready to join as equals, having learned their lesson in humility. The new order was established, not through force or dominance, but through humanity's simple belief that every species deserved the chance to reach its full potential. The universe hadn't just survived the Council's fall, it had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for a better future.